listen to music whenever you work out, or perhaps whenever you're working, or driving, or doing practically anything that requires your focus and motivation? Now imagine that you're living back in the 1800s, where there were no record labels, let alone Spotify playlists or iPods to listen to your music on. This was a time where sailors would sail the ocean blue and create their own music to listen to. When sailors would go out to sea, they would often use sea shanties on their journeys. Now, I've been involved with music since 6th grade band, and am still to this day an avid music enthusiast who listens to all kinds of different genres, and most recently that includes sea shanties. While many countries have used sea shanties on their naval voyages, we'll take a more in-depth look to see how sea shanties were used in continental Europe, North America, and in Australia. Now, there's no distinct origin to sea shanties. However, we can see many shanties originate kind of pointing towards Europe. Now, based on an article covering shanties through Britannica.com, before the 19th century, many shanties were developed around Britain. This was primarily because of the large long-distance transport and trading in and out of Britain and the UK. Most of their trade was going to other countries around Europe, including Spain, Portugal, France, so on and so forth. Now, back then they didn't have steam-powered ships, so they relied on sailing vessels and manpower in order to get their transportation across. We can also take a look in Northern Europe, where Vikings in the Norwegian area used their own versions of sea shanties. These were primarily working songs for Vikings at rowing stations whenever they would travel upriver or maybe out to sea. Most of the Viking shanties you'll see will have religious connections. So a lot of them will have specific mentionings of Valhalla, their Viking afterlife, or maybe Odin or Thor, any of their Viking gods. Now, as trade began expanding throughout the continental Europe, we'll start to see how these shanties made their way from Europe transatlantically toward North America. Now, in the early 1800s, shipping in North America began to flourish, and research on this, used through the article 19th Century Sea Shanties by Cleveland State University music professor Sharon Risco. She found that many of these shanties had melodies that would have ties back to African American and Irish folk songs. Back then, these workers and the slaves would use these shanties on ships and then start to transition their own jobs from ships to land. So we're going to start seeing a lot of sea shanties now become land working songs. This transition was spread throughout all of the United States as we know it. In the South, we would have slaves working in cotton fields and on railroads. In the north, in northern Wisconsin, we would see lumberjacks. And then out toward the west, we would see workers in stone quarries out in Oregon. All of these were using sea shanties that they transitioned into land work songs. Now, this transition from sea shanties to land songs also had an impact on the evolution of Western music, from shanties and working songs evolving more towards jazz and marches and hymns, and then eventually much later on, we're going to see them now being molded into what we know as modern pop music. Most of the shanties were also then being written on land and on sea kind of interchangeably, so that sailors would then start to have more fun and maybe work harder while they were at sea, thinking about their lives off of the ship. The topics they could have would be anywhere from a sailor's love life to just plain old drinking. Now, having North America, specifically in the US, we have seen a spike most recently in popularity with these old sea shanties, and a lot of that is thanks to the popular app TikTok. A specific shanty named The Wellerman has gone viral, and this shanty actually has ties to our final point with Australia. Now I will play a clip from my laptop of just a TikTok of some a cappella group covering this sea shanty called The Wellerman. So, here it is.
Yo, boy, sea shanty.
There once was a ship that took to sea. The name of the ship was the Billy of Tea. The winds blew up her bow, dip down, oh blow, my bully boys blow. Soon may the Wellerman come to bring us sugar and tea and rum. One day when the tonguing is done, we'll take our leave and go. Soon may the Wellerman come to bring us sugar and tea and rum. One day when the tonguing is done, we'll take our leave and go.
Alright, so that was a look into what sea shanties kind of sounded like, a more modern take right now. But with this one, we'll see Australia and New Zealand having many shipping routes between them, and this is the originating place for the Wellerman's creation. The Wellerman is actually a song based on whaling in approximately like the 19th century. According to an article called The Wellerman by the Longest Johns from author Amanda London. The primary purpose of this song was for focus and motivation while whaling or while sailors were capturing whales. So along with whaling, there are other subgenres of sea shanties, all serving different purposes for the sailors, according to the article that we looked at before with Britannica.com. We have short haul or short drag shanties. These would be used for shorter tasks and would only consist of a few lines of lyrics, mostly just repeated several times. Then we would also have hailered shanties. These were used for longer tasks and would typically involve a pull and release type rhythm. So you would see this a lot during sailors hoisting a sail, for example. And then finally, we would also have windlass or capstan shanties. This would be synchronizing their footsteps with their jobs. So like whenever they would lower an anchor of a ship, they would use a windlass shanty. So now that we've taken a look at a broad spectrum of countries, we can see how sea shanties from years past were used for work and how they have shaped modern music. The countries from continental Europe, North America, and Australia all use shanties for similar functions, but leading to different purposes. So next time you find yourself needing motivation or needing focus, try putting on a sea shanty or maybe creating your own. And with that, I will leave you with the wise words of Captain Jack Sparrow. Drink up me hearties, yo ho!